This video is the third in a series explaining how half of all American schools have indoor air qualities that costs students 1 or 2 letter grades in learning, each and every cumulative year. It's important you watch the first 2 brief videos in this series before you watch this one. In this brief video, we go into detail, building on what you would have seen earlier, about how low oxygen levels in students' schools impact various parts of students' brains and how this impact increases the older the student gets. The more it increases, the more it alters the trajectory of student life. What you see here is work that has been done by some of the nation's leading indoor air quality people, and it talks about different channels of the brain. We think of the brain, those of us who aren't scientists in this area, as a single organic element, but it isn't. It's a very complicated piece of machinery that has different parts that run at different times. So one of the fundamental parts of it is what's called basic activity. You can see the red arrow pointing towards it. This is stuff you don't actually think about, it just happens, like breathing. Or you're sitting in a long meeting and all of a sudden you realize you've got to go to the bathroom. It's unconscious and goes on and is extremely important. The next channel is applied activity. I'll talk about that more. In the interest of time, I'm going to move through this rather quickly. Focused activity is when you do what you're told. Your brain doesn't have to be creative, doesn't have to do research, it doesn't have to use a wide spectrum of things that it biologically has. Just do what you're told. And I use the metaphor here of your GPS. If the GPS says drive straight, but you can't, you have to change channels in your brain and begin to use initiative, which is a whole other part of the brain. And initiative then can be quite wide, a spectrum of activities. For example, you can do information search and find out when the next train leaves. You can look up a whole set of information like how long would it take me to get to a taxi and then a taxi to the airport and so forth. But the breadth of approach means what of all of the resources you have at your disposal, how much of your brain is actually taking advantage of that. So what we know is that different parts of this brain, each of these channels behaves differently depending on the carbon dioxide level in the room. So you can see in this particular example, when the carbon dioxide in the classroom is at 600 parts per million, students tend to perform fairly well. When it reaches 1,000, you can see the blue dots dropping. And when it hits 2,500 parts per million, you can see that some channels of the brain are impacted quite seriously. And those are initiative, information usage, breadth of approach, and basic strategy. When I showed you how carbon dioxide impacts the higher order thinking part of the brain, this now allows you to understand why the 5th, 6th, and 7th, and 8th graders had a higher failure rate when pollution rose. They use more of those portions of their brain for their academic work. 3rd and 4th graders are being asked to remember that CAT spells cat, or 2 plus 2 is 4, or other things which involve remembering stuff and reciting it back. When you get into the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, the teachers are asking the students to reach into different portions of their brain and use those portions to pass a test. And the higher the carbon dioxide or the lower the oxygen in the classroom, the less it works. So again, according to EPA, 1/2 of all of our schools have indoor air quality problems. You've just seen a simplified explanation about how lack of oxygen in classrooms impacts higher order thinking and memory. and how COVID relief money can be invested to remove the barriers to success of about half of our nation's students. Our not-for-profit organization, the Pollution Detectives, loans out meters for students and staff to survey their school's indoor environment. You can learn more about that at our website, www.thepollutiondetectives.org. In the next segment of this series, we'll show you the results of testing hundreds of classrooms, how we documented our findings, and what we found. I hope you'll join us for that.